Welcome into Through the Whistle right here on CHSN. That's Jake Butt, Michigan Wolverine. He was an All-American tight end. I'm Joshua Perry, played ball at The Ohio State University. Was a linebacker and a team captain there. Listen, college football playoff semifinal games are coming up. We are here to get some previews in. Very excited to do it. But before we get started, Jake, how are we feeling today?
Man, I'm feeling great. JP. I'm traveling to the Cotton Bowl, so that's why I'm really feeling great. That is first off, talk about these four brands, these four programs, Texas against Ohio State. We were talking about this over the summer, that these might be the two best rosters in all of college football. This is an NFL type matchup in Jerry's world. Can't wait, man. I can't wait. How you doing, though?
I'm great. I'm excited to preview these games. Love talking. I've enjoyed watching them. The first round was really tough for me. I think the second round kind of pulled me back in on this 12-team format here. So hopefully the semifinal games are good. I do want to just real quick touch on something you just said. In an age of more access to the playoff, in an age of you've got teams like Indiana and SMU, you got Boise State and Arizona State that make it. The final four teams are the bluest of the blue bloods. Ohio State taking on Texas, Pennsylvania State taking on Notre Dame. Maybe a little bit of their history is more in the 80s and 90s, but I mean, think about the brands that are here in the age of access. It's kind of wild when you put that context around it.
Yeah, the truth is, man, because I know everybody loves March Madness, but, basketball and football are so different. And, in basketball, all it takes is someone to get super hot on the right day and have the favorite be just a little bit off. In football, that doesn't really apply. I also think that's why football is the ultimate team sport. We love Cinderella stories. We got a bunch of Cinderella stories in season, but when push comes to shove in the playoffs, you might get lucky and get Arizona State, almost a Cinderella story, but not quite.
I mean, but I could see a team pulling off one. It was really hard to see a team, I think, do 3 or 4, right? Like that's going to be the big challenge there, because now you're talking about the totality of your roster, the accumulation of all the violence that happens on the football field there. And as we know too, matchups are big in this sport, right? And like the best teams typically are the ones that even when the matchup's not great, the talent comes through, and so I do think it's an interesting thing, and we can kind of do our review of the college football playoff expansion once the whole thing is over. But let's start talking about these games. We got an Orange Bowl. It's happening on Thursday night. That is Penn State. That is Notre Dame. As we mentioned on our show last week, Marcus Freeman, James Franklin, 2 black coaches. One of them will win and end up coaching in an FBS national championship game. First time ever for a black coach. Pretty cool there. These teams are both very interesting to me because I think they're built similarly, but they get the job done differently. Very good defenses, Jake. Teams that have a great ability to pound the rock. What are you seeing initially when you look at this matchup?
Yeah, exactly that. And I guess really – if I had to trust, I'd say Penn State's offense is more complete than Notre Dame's offense. At its best, Notre Dame's probably a better rushing team than Penn State, but it's close. But I trust in Drew Aller to be able to push the ball down the field more than I trust in Riley Leonard. But what I really am interested in seeing here, Joshua, is when Penn State has the ball is personnel. So looking at Penn State, the amount of the percentage of since week 11, they've run just about 60% of their plays out of 12 personnel. Meanwhile, for Notre Dame, they have seen the fifth fewest amount of 12 personnel all season. Now, that's something you might just gloss over, but I think that's a big piece in this. As you know, from a defensive standpoint, 12 personnel, particularly with Tyler Warren, puts you into a serious bind defensively. 12 personnel to our viewers means 1 running back and 2 tight ends. So for Notre Dame, how much defensive success they've had this year, they now have to ask themselves, are you going to match 12 personnel with bigger bodies and stay in base? Well, who's going to guard Tyler Warren? On the flip side, if you want to get into nickel and bring in smaller guys that can match athletically with Tyler Warren, how are you going to shut down the run? That chess match there is something I'm really intrigued to see, because I believe for Penn State to win, it's for either team to win, but for Penn State, particularly with how limited they are at the wide receiver position, it's going to come down to running the ball and then getting into play action for Drew Aller. So I don't know if I'm reading too much into that. Are you interested in that as a defensive guy? Do you think that that's a big thing to watch, considering how vast this is? What you're talking about, Notre Dame has seen the 5th fewest amount of 12 personnel this year, and all of a sudden you're facing a Penn State team that has lived in 12 personnel and has the Mackey Award winner.
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold for me too when I look at Notre Dame and what they do defensively. So just right off the bat, Xavier Watts, All-American safety, he's a little bit banged up coming out of their game against Georgia. I think that really matters there, right? Like, I think especially going up against Tyler Warren, the availability of your safeties and what your secondary room looks like and how it's constructed is important. And that's a secondary room that's been banged up all year, by the way. Like, they have rolled through a bunch of guys. And so that's a question that they're going to have to ask, is just like, how do they feel about their personnel generally? But then you look at the way that they actually play defense. They play, and I think it's top 5 in terms of percentage nationally for college football. They play man-to-man at a very high rate. Until you start to ask the question, who is your matchup, right? Because if I'm a team that's a heavy zone team, for example, it really doesn't matter. I guess you're kind of asking that question in terms of, in run support, do you feel more confident about that guy and his ability to disrupt the run versus what you would lose in the pass game in zone coverage? But when you're a team that likes to play man-to-man like Notre Dame, you have to ask yourself, who is the matchup, right? And can we get 2 on them potentially? If you can get 2 on them, that might change the way you want to approach it from a personnel standpoint too. So I think that's going to be a question that they have to ask and they have to answer. I'm very curious to see how they do it. And then for Penn State, I think it's that chess match. Okay, so if Penn State comes out in 12 personnel, Notre Dame answers with base. I'm throwing the football. There's not a question about it. I'm throwing the football. Now flip it around. If Penn State comes out in 12 and Notre Dame comes out in nickel, I'm running it. I'm running it. And they've been a really good run the ball team, especially since when they played Ohio State in the regular season. Their run game has really taken off. So I think that's kind of the back and forth there. I think Notre Dame has to ask some questions, but there's a way for Penn State to play this thing to where Notre Dame still might be wrong with the right answer for their own question.
Yeah. Now that's I think that's really that statement there, and as it applies here now to the Final Four teams, like that's what a national champion is. And I believe that's even something that Ryan Day, we called Ryan Day the Ohio State Northwestern game way back. And I'm talking to Coach Day and Chip. And, what they told us is, when you do a study on Michigan, Georgia, the teams that have won national championships in recent years, it's at a certain point, it's not always about the perfect play. That should be your goal. But the great teams and the champion teams, they run the ball and have success into loaded boxes and into unadvantageous numbers, which I think is what you're getting at here. And coming off, as it applies to last game, Katron Allen, as there's both Notre Dame and Penn State have a dynamic duo in the backfield. And you saw that perfectly against Boise State. Katron Allen, the more physical, break tackles in between the tackles, and then sure enough, Singleton with his home run spree breaks one in the second half. So that's kind of what you're alluding to here for Penn State. As they chase that ability to take that next step, they were not able to do it against Ohio State, okay? But as the season went on, they grew and grew, and they were actually able to do it against Oregon. I know they came up short. They started slow. But can they do that against a really talented, elite Notre Dame defense? Because that's where the matchup is, Joshua. Notre Dame's secondary, you mentioned some of the names. That secondary shouldn't have trouble hanging with the Penn State wide receivers. I'm not talking the tight ends, but the wide receivers. So for Penn State, it's can they stay committed to the run game? That's step one. Kotelnicki got away from it. And then can they succeed in the key moments on 3rd and 3? Can they run the ball down inside the 5 in goal line situations? Can they run the ball? That's exactly what I'm looking for when Penn State has the ball.
All right, flip it over to the other side. So Notre Dame has the football. Again, we talked about it. They run the ball very well. This is also a Penn State front that you and I both would agree is one of the best in college football. Riley Leonard is, he's a ball player, right? Like, he is really good when they need him to be good running the ball. I'm not convinced that Riley quarterback. I'm convinced that he is one of the best ball players in college football. Not convinced that he is a great quarterback. Mm-hmm. What does Notre Dame have to do offensively to have success against Penn State's defense?
Control the line of scrimmage. And before we even say anything, we gotta make sure we're monitoring the health of Abdul Carter, because as good as Penn State, the Penn State defense was still outstanding against Boise, but you cannot tell me you couldn't feel an actual void. It's like a black hole out in the universe that bends space and time. When that guy's on the field and how they move him all over the place, he's the key. So can they control the line of scrimmage? And can they win schematically? You know how it is as a defensive guy. You know, every defensive coordinator I talked to calling games this year, the number one thing they say they fear is a quarterback that can run. All of a sudden you get plus numbers and you add and gap. And Riley Leonard is a willing and capable runner. And he puts his body on the line. One thing I know about Riley Leonard, if it's 3rd and 3, he's diving for the sticks. Down on the goal line, he's going to put his body on the line. And there's an inspirational aspect to that too. But the front 6 or 7 of Penn State's defensive line against Notre Dame's offensive line, their running backs, and their quarterback, that's going to absolutely decide this game.
Yeah, the quarterback run thing is always a difficult spot. I think you have to ask the question, though, against the Penn State defense, how many times are you willing to say you want to get your quarterback hit? I mean, he passes average for runs against Georgia probably somewhere in the 3rd quarter. That was a physical football game.
Yeah.
I mean, those teams were out there hitting. I expect this one to be as physical. So I think where it has to evolve for them is, what are some play action looks that can, or maybe RPO looks that can incorporate Riley Leonard's legs but don't put him in as much danger? That's where I would try to get that offense to in this one, because there's plenty of the quarterback run on tape. As a defensive coordinator, to your point, I'm ready to adjust. I've got the extra resources devoted. I'm coaching my guys on how I want them to play it. Well, now I'm susceptible to some play actions because maybe I'm not as worried about the pass game and what my drops look like and my landmarks and all the different things. I think that's the hard part there. Ultimately in this game, and I know we got to move on to the other one, I think Penn State's a better team. Yeah. And I'm giving them the edge. I would pick them to win. It wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame beats them, though, because I think Notre Dame, the thing about them, we mentioned the offense and defense, they care about special teams. Marcus Freeman's dialed into the situations. Like, there are legitimate pathways for them to get a win in this game.
Okay, so I'm with you there too. I trust Drew Aller more than Riley Leonard. I really, across the board, like I feel Penn State in key positions, like from a talent standpoint, just has a slight edge on Notre Dame.
Yes.
But the concern is, and I look at the lead up to this, Notre Dame, both teams have shown some creativity. Penn State's creativity has worked against them. Okay. The Boise State game should have never been close. Kotelnicki, creativity, that hurt them. Meanwhile, I look at Marcus Freeman and what he's done. That helped them against Georgia. They were prepared and used creativity and gadgets to their advantage. So that's one thing that I will say, it concerns me, because we've seen this with James Franklin, where that he has cost his team games because of some of the creativity. And it feels like at times Notre Dame, when they did some of those formations and tricks and gadgets, they were prepared and confident, and they said, we saw something on film and we're going to use this. Whereas with James Franklin, sometimes it feels like we're going to check the box of creativity and it's more of a guessing game. And that's the one area that I think I give Notre Dame the edge.
I'm totally there with you. I would give them the edge. I would like to play devil's advocate for a sec. So that play where they ran 11 off, 11 on, there was a false start that was not called.
Notre Dame, Georgia, right?
Yeah. Yes, right? Yeah. So, those are the edges in the game. Sometimes you got to get away with stuff like that. Let's not forget 10 men on the field last year against Ohio State, right? Like, there are these times where it's like super dialed in, one guy. Just one guy is what I'm talking about in either one of these situations. That's not super locked in. Is the difference in being a genius in a situation and a guy who's a dope in the situation. So I think, stakes are high. I think James Franklin probably needs this one a little bit more, but these are two coaches, and the same thing for the other game, where people have said, oh, they can't win the big game, or Penn State, Notre Dame in this era, not capable of winning a national title. So I'm excited to see the way this one ends. I do want to flip it over. You're going to be at the Cotton Bowl down there in Dallas. You got Texas, going to be a home crowd about 200 miles away from Austin. Ohio State's playing there. We know about the Buckeyes. We have talked about them ad nauseum on this show. Offensively, they've been phenomenal. It's Jeremiah Smith, and then it's Emeka Ibuka, and then it's Travion Henderson. Will Howard's been spinning the ball. You throw in Quinshon Judkins to throw some haymakers in there at the end. It's been complete. The offensive line has looked good. On defense, starts with the guys up front. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau have been great. Cody Simon at the second level has been a man possessed. And then really the whole secondary, Denzel Burke, you're not hearing his name for anything negative. Same thing with Davison Igbinosun. In the two safeties, Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs have been really good. So we have that all on the table. Texas, however, very talented roster. This is one of the best rosters in the country, two of the most expensive, no doubt. But you got Quinn Ewers there on offense. You've got Golden at wide receiver. You got Wisner, who's come on at running back. It's a talented tight end group. Offensive line banged up right now, but those dudes are big. They move well when they're healthy. And then flip it over to defense. Strong in the trenches. Very fast, athletic, and physical at the second level. And that's a secondary that can cover, and they'll come up and hit you too. So what do you make of this one when you start to break down two of maybe on paper the most talented teams that we've seen in a while?
Okay, so my blanket statement is if Ohio State plays the way we saw them play against Tennessee and against Oregon, it doesn't matter what Texas does. And I don't mean to be disrespectful because Texas is a good team, but that what we've seen these past 2 weeks is it's nightmare fuel for Texas. Let's start with Texas having the ball, and you work your way down, okay? The matchup of Sark against Jim Knowles, going to be a really fun matchup. Sark, one of the great offensive minds in college football. Jim Knowles has this defense. This is why they went out and hired Jim Knowles. This is why you go out and get Caleb Downs. This is what you've wanted to see from JTT and Jack Sawyer and Tyleik Williams. Here's the key, okay? Texas won the game against Clemson on the ground. They ran the heck out of the ball. Arizona State, they kind of shut them down, honestly. So
I think it was like 59 yards rushing against Arizona State.
And let me just tell you, that Buckeye front is going to be turned up a bunch of knots from Arizona State. Here's the key. So Texas might have the best tackle duo in college football, certainly one of them. Cameron Williams, their right tackle, missed the Arizona State game. He was practicing limited, missed the game. That's something to monitor because they run a lot of outside zone. Yep. And for all the heck that JTT and Jack Sawyer get for not getting after the quarterback, those guys are stone walls in the run game, and they set firm edges. They are stone. Here's the other thing, Joshua. So Ohio State playing in the Big Ten, in order to you run a lot of single high, you can play cover one or single high safety defense and bring that extra safety in the box because your opponents are going to run the ball to beat you. Well, against Tennessee and against Oregon, Ohio State, a statistical jump in too high coverage, too high shell, right? Yep. You mentioned not seeing we haven't heard about Burke and Igbinosun because you have safety help over top. They've helped those guys. The other key is Jordan Hancock, who typically plays nickel, but has played safety at times this season. They've put him and Ransom at safety and let Caleb Downs kind of roam a little bit.
Yes.
Jim Knowles loves to play safeties. It's the key going all the way back to Oklahoma State. Safeties are the key. So I think that has been the biggest difference here is they started to implement more split safety defense and allowed Caleb Downs to roam around a little bit. And then you've seen this defensive front emerge and start to play lights out. That's what I'm watching out for here. Because if Texas can't run the ball, which it's going to be hard to do, I don't trust Quinn Ewers to beat.
I don't either.
I do not trust him. And then PFF has grades, Joshua, and I'm rambling here. His grades when facing split safety defense, they're not pretty. I'm just saying, and that's true for most quarterbacks. It's harder to throw in a split safety defense. His grades are not pretty against split safety.
You want to know why? But you know why? It's because when they're playing split safeties, you have to be able to drive the ball into windows, right? Like if you got a cat who's running a corner route, right? You got the underneath coverage who's sinking, right? And you've got the safety over top. There's a window that you have to make it into, right?
Yeah.
He does not drive the football in the windows. If you're seeing split safety coverage, you have an opportunity to hurt a team in the seams, right? Like you can find that window there between the safeties just over the linebacker if he's too slow to carry. But if you can't drive the football, you're not going to hit it. And he struggles driving the football. He throws a pretty ball, guys. I'm not saying he can't throw the ball. Throws a pretty ball. When it comes to touch passes, he's one of the best in college football. He's actually pretty good when it comes to location. His issue is pace. Pace is the problem for him. And that's why he struggles against two high safeties. I think that's going to be one in this game. And Caleb Downs is going to have an opportunity to try to take the football away. Got his hands on the ball a ton against Oregon. I look at Ohio State offensively, and I just ask the question, is this the game against this front seven where the offensive line starts to look like the unit that we've been concerned with? Because the last two games, we have not said a word about this offensive line and some of the issues that have been presented.
I was going to say, Donovan Jackson, when you talk about guys, and this is another storyline, is you have emotional leaders that have stepped up. Jack Sawyer has been an emotional leader that stepped up. Obviously, Caleb Downs, the way he hits you. But Donovan Jackson moving out to tackle, that dude, and Tennessee's got a first-round edge rusher, okay? Like Oregon's got a great defensive line. Donovan Jackson
kid from Tennessee, I think, is good, but I think he's a social media edge rusher. I think the media hyped him, but neither here nor there. He's very talented.
But is he Chop Robinson, right? Is he not a Chop Robinson?
Yeah, no, I'm saying he's very talented, but I do want to say.
Sure. But still, hey, you're a guard playing out in space, and that has.
Well, dude, the two guys from Oregon, the Twin Towers there, like if you could block those guys, you can block anybody. Those are two aliens.
Yes. So that's the piece of this. But I think they've been helped by their play calling. Okay. And you and I, we went back and watched it was boneheaded, the game plan against Michigan, but they've started to run more gap scheme. And I think that helps them. Gap scheme, just for our viewers, is it's when in doubt, gap scheme cleans up the picture, because if you're on if you're play side, okay, your rules are simple. You guys can even understand this. You step inside, okay? And if there's color in your gap, you hit it. And then you have polars that come around and they look for color. And then the running backs follow them. Rather than in zone scheme, you're trying to identify and guess and do it. Oh, with Ohio State's athletes, you just run gap scheme and say, block your gap, pull and go hit somebody, and the backs will make you right. So I think Chip and Ryan have done a good job of helping those guys out. And then you get into play action off of that. They're running gap scheme, counter scheme, and then sending Jeremiah Smith or Ibuka or whoever on like a slide route. And it's just it's too much for defenses to stop.
Dude, I mean, when they had Jeremiah we called it the sub boot, but, he was sliced behind the line. They had pulled the guard opposite. So you have all of the pursuit going away from where Jeremiah is going behind the line of scrimmage. And that created nothing but space where, to credit those wide receivers out there, they're on body blocking. I mean, that's a win every time. And that's the type of play calling you're talking about. When I think about gap scheme runs, I always thought about the blocking angles for the offensive linemen. I think it gives them advantageous angles to engage into blocks, right?
Yes.
You're able to you can knock a guy on his hip instead of trying to square somebody up at times, right? Like it makes more sense. You get some dudes pulling around, coming downhill now on a smaller man. It's been really good to see. Ultimately for me, I think the train keeps rolling for Ohio State. They're confident right now, very talented. They're dialed in players and coaches. And frankly, if Sark can't get Texas in a perfect plays offensively, I don't think their offense is all that effective. Quarterback is good, but he struggles when it's not defined for him. I don't think the wide receivers do a great job of winning, even though I think that they're very talented, can go up and high point the ball and make 50-50 catches, but they're covered a lot of times, right? Like these are the things that I'm looking at and I say Ohio State can give them problems.
Yeah, no, listen, and I'm completely with you. And frankly, I don't think there is a perfect play, because Ohio State, the way they've been playing defensively, it's conservative play calls with athletes that are aggressive. So they're playing safe cover 2 shell, and yet they're aggressive in the run game. So I have Ohio State winning the national. You want to know my thoughts on this game? Is I have Ohio State winning the national championship, and I don't even care who wins Penn State, Notre Dame. So that's my opinion on Texas too.
I got to see the way these games play out before I say all of that. But
I'm so confident in that team right now.
No, they're rolling. They look really good.
Yeah.
Jake, I thought this was really good. I appreciate you spending some time here on the preview.
Efficient.
It was quick. I know. How about it? But
how about Will Howard? Last thing before we go, Will Howard.
Yeah.
I think he has been phenomenal. And you listen to the way his teammates talk about him, Joshua. The Buckeyes, your alma mater, found a leader in Will Howard this year.
So I don't want to bring up old things, but I worked with some people at a different place, and they made the comment when Will Howard, after the Indiana game, was doing the cigarette thing, Signetti. They were like, "Oh, I don't like that," and he hasn't been there, and I don't know why he's the guy who's doing all that, yada yada yada. And I'm like, y'all don't get it, because other quarterbacks in the past would have never done it. And I think Ohio State needed to get back to, and not forever, but at least for a time, back to the junkyard dog of quarterbacks, who is not a first-round pick, but he is a dude that everybody wants to play hard for. I think of J.T. Barrett. I said this comp earlier in the year. J.T. Barrett would go out there and he would have some nasty games. But one thing you knew about him, he was gonna fight his butt off. He's gonna be a great teammate. And if he made a mistake, he was gonna work his tail off to get it right. And I see a lot of that in Will Howard from his approach. Michigan game, nasty. Been phenomenal since. Right? Like, and guys believe in him. So what do you say?
I got Ohio State winning 31-17.
I think it's going to be in that neighborhood. I think Ohio State could put up as many as 38 points in this game.
Yeah,
I really do. Yeah. But I think conservatively, I would go with a 31 to. I'll go with a 31-17 as well. I think 17-21 sounds about right with this Ohio State defense. But that will do it for us right here on Through the Whistle. If you want to catch us, you can watch us on the Big College Football Show right here on CHSN 5 Central. We break down everything in Big Ten football, and we even go beyond. Going to be a great finish to the season. Going to be a phenomenal offseason. But that'll do it for us here today. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.